Welcome really to Australia. I'm sure you probably got on the boat and the plane and the canoe to get here. So thanks for making it here. Just to double check in case you're in the wrong room, this is breakout session number 3. And our topic today will be supporting local nonprofits. What philanthropists need to know. Just so that you're right in case you wanted to go to somewhere else. And with me today is Asalo Pichiwe. And Benga. You guys already have the bios in your file, so I won't go into detail on who they are and what they do. We'll just go directly into the session and with the questions. My name is Essie Emery, and I am with Trust Africa. I currently direct a donor advised fund called the Keys Trust Fund. Specifically based in Ogoni land. This is a trust fund that was created out of the Ogoni 9. This is the environmental lawsuit against the federal government, the former federal government of Nigeria, the Abacha administration, and Shell Oil. And they set aside a $5 million grant to create a small community foundation, which is the Keys Trust, which is what I now direct. And for those who may not know who Trust Africa is a Pan-African organization that uses a lot of its resources in promoting and securing democracy and development across the continent. Trust Africa just celebrated its 10-year anniversary last year. So they're still a small baby, I guess, in the philanthropy space in Africa. So this session is going to attempt to demystify the cumbersome processes of philanthropists, working with local nonprofits, and try to explore tactics, solutions, avenues for strengthening the relationship between both parties. So over the past day and a half, I think one of the words that has struck over and over again is trust. And how do you build trust within the sector itself, between philanthropist to philanthropist, donor to donor, and then how do you build trust between donor and your beneficiaries, either grantee partners or those you are working directly with. So I think that's part of this process in terms of demystifying what actually needs to happen and what this relationship should look like if it currently isn't that way. I have on the panel with me I guess 2 donors, myself and Jimmy, in terms of giving donors, and we have an organization that receives, but you don't give directly. So I think he plays it. We don't give money, and it doesn't have to be money. I think that's one of the panelists said earlier. Your donation, your philanthropy could be something else. It does not always have to be in an amount of dollars. So Banger's organization plays a sort of unique role in kind of dance both sides of the coin. So I think I'll start off by asking, and I guess actually can go to you, Banger, since you haven't been here, in terms of what role does trust play in the relationship between philanthropists, donors, and funders and donors and nonprofits? How do you think trust actually can obviously benefit, and in what way?
So I think life itself is built on trust. I'm going to have a conversation with you. There are 2 things. I can pretend to have a conversation with you, and then after we both pretend, we move on, right? Or we can have a meaningful conversation because I trust that you have something to share with me, and then you trust I'm listening to you. So I think that we can't overemphasize the place of trust. If someone is giving resources for something to be done, then it's not just a contract. There's more than a contract right there. There's the fact that I believe that these resources will be used to do something. And I, on the other end, am receiving resources from you. I trust that you will allow me to do what I know to do best. Because a few years ago, we used to have this interesting conversation where organizations would then say, okay, this is what we will give you to do X, Y, Z. But I think we've moved a long way from that. We've moved to a scenario where people don't take money because they're desperate. Yeah, we still have that happen from time to time, but people take money because this organization that is giving me money or that is adding value to my work is doing it because we share something in common. So I think the first element in trust is common ground. The fact that I want to work with young people, connect them with opportunities, and that is something you believe Because if you don't believe in that, then we have a fundamental problem. Then it means that your expectations will be different from my expectations. And if expectations are different, I may not even do something wrong, but I will do what I want to do, and then you don't see what you want to see, and then there's a problem. And then what eventually happens is that trust is lost. You assume that I've done something with this. So I think one of the first things we must realize is that there must be common ground. There must be a handshake between your vision as an organization that gives support and my vision as an organization that accepts support. It's a bit tempting as a new organization or as a young organization that really needs money. It's a bit tempting for you to take business from just anyone and change directions. But over the last 10 years, what I've seen is anyone who does that, it means that you'll be gone in less than 10 years. Because if today what you're doing is this topic because I can get resources for it, that will not be popular for 20 years. Things change, cycles come and go. Whoever knew that the whole talk about technology for development in 2003 and 2005 was going to fizzle out and then come back again recently. So I think that having common ground is important as far as trust is concerned. And the second thing is also understanding deliverables from the very beginning. There is no assumption, right? I know that when you're writing a proposal at times or when you're having a conversation about coffee, because my theory is that all of the funding agreements happen during coffee break, not really when you're sending proposals. We all know that, right? But it has to be formalized and you have to check things. Is that there is no misalignment of expectations. It's that I want to train young people. I'm not training them because I want to train 1 billion young people. I'm training them because I'm looking for 7 young people who can become examples of others. But if you are then looking for 1 million, if you're looking for numbers and I'm looking for impact, then we have a problem. So I think that these are two things I'd like to highlight that are very, very central to the issue of trust. Many times, to be honest, I don't think, maybe there are people, but I really don't think anybody sets out to take resources and misuse that. I really honestly don't think so. It may happen once in a while, but many times, more often than not, it's the fact that our objectives don't align. So I want to pay my staff better, and then the resources you're giving me, you're saying I can only use it for programs. Guess what? I'm going to use it to pay my staff better, and then you're going to say you don't trust me anymore because I've used the money the wrong way. I didn't exactly use it the wrong way. I used it for what I considered my need, not the need you thought you were written. So alignment of of vision and also alignment of expectations.
Right. I think that's two really great points. But on the other side, as a donor or a philanthropist, there's that famous saying, trust but verify. And in the local context, you have, I think that the panelists said in the last session, that you have suspicious board members on the board who do not declare that conflict of interest. And where I work specifically in the Niger Delta, trust is something that has been abused in very spectacular ways. So you can't just blindly believe what someone says. And it means that you have to do your due diligence and literally become almost like an investigator. Sort of go beneath whatever they're saying and interview and cross-interview and check past donors who may have given. So I think trust is something that I would like to believe that it's as simple as you said, but the reality is sometimes it's complicated. And I think that's one of the reasons why this issue has come up the last day and a half, is that we don't trust each other because there have been bad examples. Very, very clearly, there are organizations or briefcase non-profits, I guess the suitcase guy that just has his business in his briefcase or in his pocketbook and said, this is my business, and they would take the money and marry his third wife. No, that's an actual example. The money is used for wedding ceremonies, it's used to buy a new house, it's used to buy a car, and it happens over and over again. And so how do we stop that? But I think we're getting there. We're definitely getting there. I think people now know that we have to be accountable, and that broadcasting of the bad eggs helps in that aspect. Yeah, sure.
If you don't mind. Sure. And I can show up after this.
No. It's a conversation.
I don't want to forget this. I was once a briefcase NGO, and I think it's important, for me to say this. In 2005, while I worked for Junior Achievement, I started, doing small things on the side. Like I spent my weekends and vacation traveling around Nigeria. I had no idea it was going to become an organization. And by 2007, I was the only one. So literally, I was a briefcase NGO. But I think there's a learning process that makes you transit between briefcase NGO and a Pan-African institution. And I think the challenge is identifying people who are honest and can go through that process. Because my fear is, when we talk about briefcase NGOs, we sort of, people apply for funding in their first year and no one gives them money. But the problem with that is, in 10 years, you have no idea what they're going to become. They may become that organization you will beg to take money, and they may not have capacity to take it from you because at this point they've grown, bigger than you. So I think the gap is in transition, being able to move from briefcase, if it applies, to becoming an institution. Do we want to have a situation where we can have, donor partners and everyone else helping with structures? So if I started a board in 2007, they were all going to be my family members. Those are the people I knew at the time. Right now, my board is diverse. I mean, it's 10 years later and all that. But in year one, my board was going to be my girlfriend, father who was a politician, and someone else. So I think there's an important place for that learning curve.
No, that's true. Chile, on the flip side, so what do local nonprofits need to do to make themselves investment ready or credible? As you've given out grants, what are you looking for? What core examples are you looking for? I can share this one. What core examples do you look for, or I guess, templates for making for the local nonprofits themselves investment ready?
Hello everyone. Before I start, I just need to clarify, I'm at Michigan State University, managing the MasterCard Foundation grant. I have spent the past 20 or so years of my career working with both nonprofits as well as a foundation, so I think I can speak from both perspectives. Before I answer your question directly, I wanted to respond to something that you said. Especially in a country like Nigeria with 180 plus million, they're going to be bad eggs. So I wouldn't start with the assumption that there are no NGOs. In fact, they're called NGIs. The first time I heard that phrase was in Nigeria. Non-governmental individuals. I've worked with them. It's interesting because whenever I've lived in Nairobi and Ghana and Nigeria, the same thing happens, but especially in Nigeria, when you first come, they're happy. There's a lot of excitement around the fact that, sorry. There's a lot of excitement around the fact that finally they're sending us one of our own, right? She'll understand how it's done. And then a few months later, they're like, no, this is not what we wanted. The point is, a grant is a contract. It's a contract. If you know you're not going to abide by the terms of the contract, don't take the contract. Right? So I take issue with NGOs saying, we want this grant, but we want it on our own terms. We don't want to, then don't take it. Wait for a funder who can give you a grant according to those terms that you are comfortable with. Even now, at Michigan State, Michigan State is one of the most connected universities to Africa, and we are managing a scholarship program. And one of the things I say to my colleagues is the worst kind of bigotry is the bigotry of no expectations. Right? So hold us to the same standards. Hold the African students to the same standards. Hold the African NGOs to the same standards. Don't create double standards. Don't lower the standards. Now, there is room for simplifying unnecessarily complex processes, but accountability and transparency should not be compromised. So what do philanthropists expect NGOs to know? What should NGOs know? One, the landscape is changing. 30, 40 years ago, people just gave you money because you did a good pitch, right? And I like you, and I like the cause, and so here's $20,000. don't even bother reporting. That's no longer the case. Now it's moving from charity, as someone said yesterday, to philanthropy, and even moving from philanthropy to donors demanding a business DNA, a return on investment. So if we, African CBOs and NGOs, don't understand that the landscape is changing, we're going to be having this conversation about absorptive capacity 20 years from now. So the best thing we can do for local NGOs is to help them build their capacity. The other thing to know is that it's a competitive environment. I remember working with Junior Achievement. I was CEO for JA in my last job, and we had a big grant from Barclays. And Barclays, as soon as I came in, they said, we're no longer going in that direction. This is the direction we want to go in. And some of my colleagues would tell them this is what we do. And this Barclays officer said to me, listen to me, we're spoiled for choice. She was very direct. It's either you want to go in the direction we want to go or not. So we started a conversation. So the point I'm making is there's competition, right? So if you don't understand that what you don't want, other people may have the capacity to do. And like any competitive environment, you have to prepare, you have to set goals, you have to measure whether you're meeting your goals, and you have to measure your goals against the goals, your accomplishments against the goals you set, but also against your competitors, right? And then finally, capacity building is not for the donor. Capacity building is for you, it's for us. When you build your capacity to do things efficiently and effectively, it's not just to get it right. It's so that you can be more impactful in the work that you do. That's how I do.
I think I have a follow-up question to that. I once worked with a colleague, and he was an expert in M&E. And his phrase every time in terms of dealing with a grantee or a potential grantee, and he will always say this, is what is the minimum amount of ignorance needed to make decisions for and about this grantee? So that specifically meant like we're not going to ask them to submit a 20-page monthly report every month. We're not going to, their report can come in a number of ways. It can be a story on social media. It can be a 3-minute video. It can be a different format than a written document, because in some cases, that organization may not have the capacity to constantly do that. So what are some of the key things, like very minimum, the philanthropists or donors need to make those decisions and to make it more of a conversation versus a report, a template, an annual report, an audited bank statement, all the sort of complicated things that small numbers are not going to have from year one, first instance.
I think many funders are really becoming creative in the way they engage with NGOs. So videos, human interest stories, these are really big and acceptable ways of communicating. I think where the challenge comes in is with financial accountability. There's no video that's going to, you have to say, you gave me $100, this is what I did with $100. You gave me $10,000, and this is what I did with the $10,000. You may not be able to produce receipts for everything, but there are ways to account for expenditure without receipts. So for instance, one of the major challenges working in communities is getting taxi receipts from drivers. It's just not. The driver looks. In fact, they give you the receipt and say, you can write whatever you want. So I mean, there are certain things that we still need to, but there's no getting around that. Financial literacy is good practice for you, managing your own budget, managing your own finances. So however you would treat your personal finances, treat the donor finances like that. But I think in terms of the narrative and communicating the narrative, there's a lot of creative ways that are being accepted, actually more interesting than a 40-page report. And donors are actually asking and appreciative of that.
I'm actually going to come back to you later. So how did, you talked earlier about transitioning from a briefcase NGO to now being one of the reputable organizations in Nigeria. But there were several steps that you had to take. What were those specifically? How can NGOs or local NGOs learn from what you did specifically to get yourself investment ready? Was it completely restructuring your board, for instance? Was it getting a physical building? Was it, how did you hire competent staff? Because that's also another resource that is sometimes overlooked in terms of creating your capacity, and where donors don't support that directly.
So, the name is Leslie Akams. Some people in the room will know her. I went to interview for the Ashoka Fellowship in 2008. That is late 2007, 2008. And she looked at me and said, "Hire an accountant." And I had no idea what she was talking about. A few years later, I understood what she was talking about. What she was trying to say, what she couldn't say, was, "I think money is going to come your way, so you're going to need help." Because, and once she said that, and so before that, all I did was, I was an ICT consultant. I wasn't not so comfortable, but I made money. And I didn't need much of the money because every weekend I was invited to go and speak somewhere. Once in a while, I'm invited to go and speak outside, and everything is paid for. So I wasn't really using my own money. And I was single, I didn't have money at the time, so I didn't need money. And what I would do was to plow the money into the project. So it was easy that way. But what she advised, and that I did immediately, was then to partner with someone who understood money. And I think that because people who are starting out think that money is a problem, or getting money is a problem, they don't prepare for it. I think I was lucky that Leslie told me that early, because if I learned this later, I probably would have been in trouble. Because at that time, my money and my organization's money, there was no difference. I was the one who were married. Literally. My money paid for rent, which was not even rent of it. It was rent of computers in the cyber cafe because we couldn't afford to have a building. So whenever I made some money from consulting or something, I would pay for it. And then when I got a volunteer to work for me, the account, I opened an account there, and the account was always empty, but I would then transfer money from my own account to the organization's account so that I could transfer to him, so that he would know he'd been paid by the organization. And everything was messed up. But the moment she said that, of course I couldn't hire an accountant until maybe a year and a half later or something like that. But immediately, I reached out to people who understood money. So I think the first thing that people need to do, and it's not just about money, but it's about structures. Structure, policy. What do I pay myself? How do I, have conversations around hiring? Because to be honest, you can't hire the best staff when you start out. In 2008, I took everyone who came. Because everyone came as a volunteer, and many of them said, "Oh, I'll work for you for free," and I took them. I took everyone. But at some point, there were some who were more, there was someone who was more of a problem to the organization than helped to the organization. And that was the year that I learned that there is no wrong person for the job. There's no stupid person on the job. It's just that they're in the wrong job. This guy left me and went to work somewhere in the private sector and became a hero. And I'm like, thank God I let you go, and what to reference it and things like that. So people need to start by understanding structures. So what I did, and I think this was useful for me, was because I got involved in some fellowships, and that's why I said, structure often comes from exposure, more often than not, from when you're exposed to how best it's done. So I was part of this fellowship, Session Fellowship, and some other fellowships, and we were introduced to conversations around hiring, conversations around budgets, conversations around firing, conversations around transition, about leaving the organization, succession. Now, you're talking to me, this is 2008, don't forget, I'm 1 year into running my organization, and some dude from Illinois is telling me, "Oh, you need to start thinking about succession planning." I'm like, are you crazy? Like, succession planning? But that was helpful, because what that did was it told me I will not be here forever. And right now, and I said this as a joke in the office, I'm able to go anywhere and not have to worry. Many years ago, if I left the office, my phone would ring. If I'll be the one to call the office and say, "Hey, I hope we're still fine. I hope that nothing has happened." So I think it's important to begin with the end in mind. What kind of organization do you want to be in 10 years or 20 years? And so the exercise that I did was, took some time off, about 2 weeks, and I went to think a lot about this. What kind of organization will we be in 20 years? This was 2007. And so we're still on path, right? And the answer to myself was that, well, we'd like to be a Pan-African organization. We'd like to replicate what we're doing in Nigeria and other countries. I had no idea that we'd get there in 10 years. But the reason that happened was because we were deliberate. We planned for it and we expected it. I think the major challenge, when you start, is that you're so focused on survival that innovation isn't an option. So survival is how do we pay salaries? How do we, keep the roof over our heads and things like that. What helped me was I got a fellowship that paid my stipends, in quotes, my salaries, for 3 years. And so I didn't have to think about my salary. So every dollar, every naira, every yen, every cent, every dalasi that I raised was focused on the program. Structures like that help a lot. So right now, I'm glad that I'm now in a position working with some partners, identifying individuals across the continent who are doing something similar to what I was doing 10 years ago, and supporting them with money, not money for their program, with money for their salaries. Literally, it's a fellowship that pays you to find money for real work and not just to pay yourself. Because when you're looking for money to pay yourself and money for the real work, there's a temptation for you to divert some of that money to yourself. But when you are taken care of, then that takes that out of the picture completely. So I think that it's on both ends. Organizations don't have, if you want a good pool of people to work with, then you need to invest in identifying early organizations that show interest, that show some form of early traction, and supporting them with lessons about structures, training about audit. When we audited our first audit, by the way, I took that document home and I was doing a dance, and everyone around me was wondering what was going on, and they didn't understand what that did to me. It was a major milestone. This was after 4 years of working with money, but that was our first audit. And the next thing I did was I scanned this document and I posted it online. And I posted a tweet. This is our annual report. We are always asking government about accounting for their own money. This is ours. And when we did that, even liberating, it was like, oh my God, we've done it. But what people around me didn't understand that I was doing, and I tried to explain to them, but English at times doesn't convey the meaning, action does, was to say to them that from today, we cannot misuse one naira. Because this account, if you go to paradamhq.org today and check for our audited accounts, you will find everything there. And that means I answer to anyone who is able to go to that website. So one of the things I would advise people to do is also to set themselves up for embarrassment when you do the wrong thing early enough, so that becomes a check on you. So when the resources do come, there is no room. I tell my accountant all the time, manager for finance and assets, etc. Listen, guy, if I'm going to jail, we're going to Ghana. Like, seriously, I'm not going alone. So don't even think about it. When I say things, it's not law. Ask me questions. And the best moment for me is when I send an email and my finance or somebody sends an email and says, oh, this is something we want to do, the EDs are aware. And he sends a reply and then copies me and says, there is no provision for this in the budget. Now that excites me because I know that checks and balances are not just about eye service, it's reality. So I think that what helps us grow are those checks and balances we get in place, and many of these things we can borrow. Half of the documents that we used at the beginning were borrowed from the things I did at junior achievement. We had, staff report template. I borrowed it. I used it for years, for 6 years. So I got into my organization and said, let's do this, and we did it. The audited account, I chanced on someone who mentioned something about transparency and how the audited account was on and things like that, even though it was after many years. But I said, you know what? They did it after 30-something years, but there's no reason why we shouldn't. This is the effect that it had on them. The moment we did that, by the way, everyone that was talking to us about, checks and, due diligence and all that, what they realized was that it was all there. There was nothing I could tell you that you wouldn't find online.
That's a great point. I think we're fortunate to have that luxury to be paid and not have to worry about paying yourself and your staff or the actual businesses for it, for your business. Most NGOs don't have that luxury. And so how do they sort of, I think I'm thinking of the ones in the Nigeria, because I'm sorry, that's my experience, and that's where I'm coming from. They're usually solving not just survival, but they're dealing with crisis in the community. It could be an oil and gas pipeline, or a peace or conflict situation where two courts are clashing with one another and people are dying literally. And so the NGO is actually trying to solve that problem and not thinking about money, just thinking about how to bring about peace in that community. Yes. Let me just finish this one short, and then I think we'll probably have a few more to Q&A. Is how do they really get out of that survival mode? It's really hard, and absolutely hard. I don't know if it's been a problem in, I know 5-10 years ago, I needed numbers for nonprofits in the US, something like 2 million. The numbers may be off, so I don't try and quote a number there, but I don't know how many NGOs there are in Nigeria. I don't know if there's something like that, and how many of them duplicate efforts. Or how many of them are not even trying, and I think it has a wonder sometimes when someone comes to us. I'm always asking who else is doing this work and who can you partner with, instead of creating yet another something center development organization. Because I'm sure there's 3 or 5 who are already doing the same work, so go volunteer or hopefully go get paid with them versus starting your own shop to do that. And I think there's a temptation, we were talking yesterday about unemployment, specifically youth unemployment, and for youth there's the temptation to call themselves an entrepreneur. They want to be the boss, they want to be the CEO, and they want to start an organization without having gone through the growing pains of being in an organization. So it's hard to constantly fight that issue. I'm going to go back to you, Jinwei, or do you have a question specifically on what
Actually, it was about when you were a Shoko Fellow. I saw that you were in a Shoko Fellow, but was that the fellowship you were referring to? Because I just thought about what you said actually, is that there are several fellowships, but I often wonder if folks don't even know about them. Opportunities, and not just fellowships, but opportunities to actually really launch your idea if you've done your research after what you just said. And there's actually a gap in services that, so like Echoing Green, Ashoka, and the Siegel Foundation just started one also, so just sharing the knowledge.
Absolutely, and I don't know if there's a database to do that.
I know. It would be interesting to kind of know about those kind of resources.
Right. I mean, it's fortunate that we can talk about it in this conference, but you had to pay $1,200 to join.
Okay, exactly.
So a local,
$200,
1,250. I'm sorry, I should say it. And after that, not your local NGO is not going to afford that. That usually can be different between doing this activity, peace building activity, or coming to, and that's usually not the final price. It's $1,250 plus hotel, plus per diem, plus flight, plus taxi. So it easily can come up to $2,000 or maybe $3,000 depending on how far you're coming. So how do we share some of these learnings from here to those organizations that are not going to be able to come? We can keep it made open. I think we have something directly.
Not to this.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, I'm also on the grant making side.
Please, you can hear me.
Yeah, sure. Can I grab the mic?
I think it's reading.
It's okay, so this one's called the story. Hi, my name is Savitra. I come from a family foundation background. And to your point exactly, I think access to this information is very important from the grantee's point of view. And I think we need to also have a point with grant makers that there is a responsibility from the grant making side as well to give that information to our grantees and the likes of them. And to find ways to, because in a conference like this, like you rightly pointed out, it's difficult because A, it's expensive, and B, the time frame, sometimes you can't leave your day job or whatever work you're doing, you're interested in, you sit for yourself. If you're a small team, you have 3 people, 1 person goes away, their role is not fulfilled for those days that they're away at the conference. So then really, what is the role of the grant maker, the people who are giving the funding? in two things. One, giving that information, that access to what you should know as a grantee based on my experience working with grantees. And the second thing is, apart from just that information, like how am I going to work alongside you to capacity build with you? So that inherent in my grant, it's not just funds, but how am I going to, as an organization, leverage of what I have, whether it's my foundation or in my case in my family business, to get that skills, expertise, volunteering from the guys who work in my finance department or work in, on your business model, for example. How can we build that into the grant as well?
I think practically for that, so there was a recent conversation we're having donors in the Niger Delta. I'm talking about supporting local NGOs, and what is that institutional percentage of the grant? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Is it 15%? And I argue that it should be a case by case. You can't make it flat 10% institutional. If we have a grant for $5,000, 10% is just $500. That's not going to buy you a laptop for that staff, for that organization. So you have to keep making room open. But I think I'll actually pose it to everybody in the room. What is that magic number for institutional support? What should it be? Is 10% too low? Is 50% too high? That might be a ridiculous number, I don't know.
Yeah, before we go into percentages, I think it's a little bit deeper, right?
Exactly.
What is the ethos around the relationship? What kind of relationship? There's a, I don't know what you say, classist, hierarchical relationship that I see between grant makers and grantees. So we're the grant makers are up here, and then the grantees are down here, and basically it's a very condescending approach, and that's not successful grant making. There are grant makers who have figured out the secret, right? And I'll use one example, because the current grant maker of ours, the MasterCard Foundation. So the issue of 15%, 20%, 30% doesn't even come in. It depends on the need. It depends on the conversation that you've had. But there's a constant engagement with partners, and we don't use the word grantees. It's a partnership relationship. It's a recognition that even though MasterCard Foundation has $500 million that they need to disperse every year, they cannot disperse those funds without the implementing funds. There's a strong recognition that we need our partners. Our partners are exactly that, our partners. And there's a listening approach, a learning approach that they adopt to really engage. And I think that's what's missing in some of the grant making. And maybe it's an issue of having dealt with a lot of organizations that don't know what they're doing, so there's a bit of fatigue with grant makers. But when you find a grantee or partner who does know what they're doing, engage them at a certain level of collaboration and respect. And do you want to explore that topic a little bit more before I go into something else?
So I think I said, she said two things about some grant has not necessarily wanted to cover some cost, which is basic. That's quite common. But what I wanted to really speak about also was I've not really been on the side of being a grant maker, even though I've worked in the foundation, so to speak, that means grant. But also, I know a lot of young people, and some of those who talk about the Niger Delta, who are NGIs, and the goal is, yes, it's great to be an NGI, but you shouldn't stick around forever being an NGI. Some people support you for a while, hoping you will grow, but if you don't grow, they owe you no apology, right? So make that real. Honest there. And in terms of information, so I've worked in an organization where we train a lot of young people to start up little running initiatives that you could call NGIs, and then we support them to grow, and there are lots of networks to support them to grow. I don't totally agree with the fact that they don't know. I've also done programs across the Niger Delta. It's a mindset issue in Nigeria with young people. I have mentored a lot of young people, and I tell them the first thing you need to do is learn. They don't want to take that call. They tell me about 5 other people who don't know half of what they think they know, and they're getting much more support. And I'm like, but it's not sustainable. You're going to crash. And I've worked with an organization that had a budget of over $5 million, yet they weren't interested in systems and structures, and they were still telling us, oh, this is Nigeria, you know. That's the problem here, and until we get our young people and everyone to realize that much of my fundraising successes in the past have been with international donors. They look at what we've done and they know where we're headed. It's even tougher sometimes convincing someone who is a local donor who also doesn't really even know what they ought to look out for. So while I can get the JP Morgans funding me, someone down here is telling me, no, what my structure doesn't really look good to what. Now it comes to the fact that they want to achieve numbers with something that's not sustainable, and they believe with that relationship we spoke about, they are here and I am here, and they assume I should sign up to whatever. And then I'm like, no, not really. And then, oh, well, maybe you're an elitist non-profit. No, it's because I grew up with structure. Right? And that's really trying to get young people to realize it's not just about, the passion is great, but you can't go around with your crude knowledge, your crude idea, and you don't want to learn. It's a society where people don't truly believe in learning. And it's very tough, and I don't see how that works for us.
Good. Yeah. I just want to say one quick thing about what is essentially general operating support. The term, like I refuse to use the term indirect support. Indirect or overhead, right? Because I spent my first 10 years of my career in government and nonprofit, and I don't understand indirect to what. Because all of the money is spent on the mission of the organization, so I actually don't know what you mean indirect to what. So I would encourage other donors to also put general.
Yeah,
that was the point.
I would just connect the dots between what you were saying and what you said. It's really changing the language that we use to talk with partners, or and West Africa we call them granting partners. And I think you use the phrase implementing partners instead of beneficiaries or some other sort of term that can constantly highlight the power dynamic in you. So for example, when I walk into, I know that people are thinking, oh, this lady with money. And so I try immediately to unbalance that, or just spend my time listening and not actually saying anything, because by asking me to say something, suddenly that becomes law. Because the woman with the money said it, so this must be true. So I don't, so I try not to do that. But really the language we use can help shift some of that relationship and build sustaining relationships that last. So that you have organizations like yours that around 10 years later, 20 years later, I'm sure you want to see me here 30 years later, you're moved on to other things. I will take the last one question. I think you had one.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, because I realized that question, so I didn't want to miss out, so I wanted to ask at the end. God bless you, Wayne, because it was like you were a spirit and you were listening to my frustration. Yes, because one of the things I think, my name is Emeka Osai. I teach social entrepreneurship at the University of Ibadan, and also help build entrepreneurial ecosystems in universities. And one of the questions I've always been worried about, like you mentioned, it's like the three of you just took it out of my hat. This conference cost $1,250. And I belong to the Mandela Washington Fellowship. I know like 3,000 young people that are involved in change. I mean, like, they can work with $500. You'll be amazed at the resourcefulness that they can achieve. However, what I've seen is that we're trying to, the models, we need to challenge certain assumptions that are happening. So I'll give you an example. Venture capital evolved out of a reason, like a group of engineers who wrote to some guys that they were trapped in a project and they couldn't get funding for the project. So we didn't have all the structured things right now. It was like an essay asking for help. And I was trying to imagine if people like Arthur Rock had said, no, this is not structured, and this is not the traditional banking model we understand, there would have been nothing called venture capital, which there would have been nothing called maybe Silicon Valley right now. So sometimes some of these young people, I know somebody who just sold her car for her 10th birthday. She clocked 33 2 weeks ago. She built something for women in Makoko community somewhere in Lagos, where these women learn fashion. So like a fashion warehouse where they learn skills. These are very poor women, but she may not have the structure. So I think sometimes it's very important to look out for the heart, the courage, because there are warriors fighting every single day, but sometimes the technical skill. So I think sometimes there's an overemphasis on technical skill over the emotional scale. And
the mission and vision, which is with what
exactly.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm sorry to jump because we have, I was told that we have like 30 seconds. So I just like 2 seconds. Yes.
So my question is, where do we find, because I'm from Lagos Business School at University, and you're, okay. So I'm from Lagos Business School, and one thing we're trying to do is to build out a training program for not-for-profits. That's context-based, but basically to get them from that point of NGI to institutionalized, strong NGO. So, and then we don't want it to be the usual suspects.
Yeah.
So where do we then, in this ecosystem, find those NGOs that may not even be here seated right now? You understand? So what are the credible platforms?
I think it's highlighting those success stories. So I'll connect it, and maybe it's the last closing conclusion. I'm so sorry. I'll give the microphone back to my panelists so they can do 1 second. But I'll give the example of Trust Africa, for example. When we talk about small grants, we really need small grants. Small grants to USAID and DFID is 100K. That's not a small grant. So our small grant is $5,000. And $5,000 is equivalent to 2.5 million naira. That's still a lot of money that can have a huge impact. So, and it allows us to take bigger risk. So we can look for those organizations that don't have the institutional standards and structures, but have the passion and mission because we want to be on a journey with them. So we can afford to take a huge risk. If $5,000, if it doesn't come back as something useful, it's okay. We can kind of close our eyes and like, well, we tried. But you can't make that sort of risk or take that sort of risk when you're giving out 150, 500 because you want more of a basic standard for 150 or whatever it is. You want that money to come back in return on investment. So I think for donors, you might want to consider how you give out grants and what is that room for taking risk that allows you to experiment in some cases and lose money. You just admit that or know that you're going to lose some money. And it's, you know, what is that threshold for you? For different donors, it could be different amounts. You know, for Trust Africa and specifically with Kisi Trust, is a huge percentage. I know that I'm just going to close my eyes and be like, oh well, that's quite a lot of $5,000, which can add up quickly at the end of the year. But it's the risk that we are willing to take. So I'll just go back to my parents and just last closing comments before we head back to America. Australia, wherever we are.
Just one comment on the last conversation, that is, people are always watching, even when you don't realize you're being watched. So the key is to keep doing the good work, and just trust that you're doing the work because you saw it need, not because you're trying to get someone's attention. As my mother would say, eye service. My message is for both the philanthropists and nonprofits. 4 key things. Communicate, commit, concentrate, and collaborate. So communication means listening, right? You have to listen to your partner. You can't just go off doing your own thing and think, well, it's either my way or the highway. Committing means you are focused on solving this particular problem. You're not focused on chasing the next fad or whatever that fad is. Concentrate is pick a sector. Pick a demographic, pick a specific country, and focus. There are all kinds of people out there doing wonderful work. You can't be all things to all people. So decide what you're calling in and focus on that. And then finally, collaborate. There's this issue with partnership and collaboration. But the need is so great that there's no way one individual, one organization can meet the need. So again, communicate, commit, concentrate, and collaborate.
And
connect and concentrate.
Pardon?
Say connect, concentrate.
Yeah, we started 10 minutes late, so we have to.
Okay, you set time up, but I can say the standing, and this is to you actually as the organizers. I think that one thing that we all in the room can commit to, and this doesn't have to be recorded, don't worry, is between now and next year. Now I can sit down. The camera isn't taking. Between now and next year, we shouldn't come back to AFP next year and have this conversation again. When we do come back, there must be a platform that organizations that are just starting out can go to. How do I get from point A to point B? That solves your problem. That solves your problem.
And there are a lot of resources, which is a frustrating thing, a lot of resources, but now connecting them to organizations. Exactly. And you talk to donors, you work with donors, and you see people, they have the investments, but no vehicle. NGOs ready to
because exactly, if you're doing research, that information is available there, and people can then make themselves available. If you're a grant maker, of course you know that if you invest in a pool of early starters, it's like going to schools. When I was in school, consulting firms would come in our 4th year and make general presentations. What they were doing, of course, we didn't know, was they were basically looking for the best guys to hire, and they get them. And so the idea is, if you start supporting people who are selling early, in the next few years, they will be your star partners. So everyone benefits, people get resources, donors are able to connect with people who can give them the biggest, the best bang for their money. And of course, research, everyone wants to do other things. So it will be great when we come next year, we can hear something like, go to afp.org/start. And
Great comments. Just help me thank my panelists for being